Yes, good people. Welcome to the show. This is Prime versus Prime Part 5. I'm Teep to the Junk, aka Random Acoustic Thoughts. My special guest, 86Boxing, Josh City, is here. Josh, what's up, brother?
What's going on, Random? All is good. Happy to be here again. As always, always enjoy the great discussions that we get to partake in. So, similar situation. So, hope all is well on your end.
Everything's good, brother. Living the dream. Um, so, folks, this particular matchup, this is crazy. We're going with Ray Leonard and Floyd Mayweather Jr. Two of the greats. They're powerful across multiple weights. I think we did we agree to match them at welter?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're gonna fight at 147. Josh City, take the floor, brother. As you think about this matchup, as you begin to try and come to grips with these two great fighters actually colliding in the first time they fight. We'll start with their first time. Maybe we'll do a second section here with a series, But what are you thinking about when you first come to grips with this fight?
Two great fighters, certainly. Um, Floyd Mayweather being a fighter that I watched a great deal, who I was very fond of as I was coming up, and still very much just learning about the sport in itself and all the things that go on. And I would say, just given the dynamics, my age, and when he was fighting, it just seemed to run parallel with my interest in the sport. And he became a standout superstar of the sport. And I think that has continued to carry over even now. Of course, he's still mentioned. And when you think about the modern times, or when you think about real time, or what's happening here today, and the recent couple of decades, then he is someone that pops up. And then there's Ray Leonard, who I'm also very fond of. Of course, I didn't get to see him fight live or anything of that nature. But that being said, he is someone that I've looked into, studied the history to a certain degree of Sugar Ray Leonard and what he was able to do, accomplish, and him representing Palmer Park, Maryland, which is where he's from out here in this particular area. As you know, I'm in DC. Then he's held in high regards around here. I've been to the Sugar Ray Leonard gym on numerous occasions. So he is very much a big deal around these parts. And it was because of who he was as a fighter, what he was able to do, what he was able to accomplish, essentially homegrown. And that allowed him to take what he could pick up from being in and around the varying gyms in this era or area. And that's what he took with him. It elevated him to another level. And I think that he became one of the superstars of the sport during his era, and of course, still known and held in high regard to this day. So, both of these fighters, highly recognizable fighters, names that when you hear them, it certainly makes sense that they were top level fighters, and you understand why their names are mentioned. And it just so happens they fought for the most part primarily in the 147-pound division, or at least that's where a number of their best matchups, just thinking about it from a stylistic standpoint and who they went up against, took place. So with that, they're both decorated amateurs. I mean, it really doesn't get much better as far as that concerns. So they were able to come into the sport with a high degree of technical ability. And you just saw that in the early stages with both of them. If you look back and get accounts from those who were in or around them, they'll tell you that it was almost a foregone thing, even when they were on the amateur side. And generally, we have guys who end up being some of the best amateurs in the world. That's sort of a head start in some sense as they jump to those pro ranks. And of course, they are built into the fighters that they ultimately become. And certainly, both of these individuals, their names are mentioned amongst the greatest welterweights of all time. And they're probably worthy of such billing. But also, when you just think about the greatest fighters of all time, you'll get both of these individuals mentioned amongst those great fighters. And we know that the sport in itself has a long, deep history, and you had to digest it in tranches in a sense. So look at it from a decade to decade perspective, or divide it up into the varying eras depending on what time frame you use as being an era. But certainly, regardless of such, both of these individuals would be highly competitive in any era that they were to have fought in. And I think you can just look at what they were able to do technically and understand why that is most certainly the case. Now, uh, this is a very interesting matchup, of course, because I will say that with history and modern times, I guess you can say there tends to be more favor towards some of the modern fighters, current generation fighters, especially for those who are right now in that generation who potentially didn't see some of the older fighters or fighters that predated their birth, etc., even going way back. And essentially, it's hard to take the visual aspect out of just seeing someone and being able to follow them real time and essentially grow with those fighters in the ring as they go on their career journey. So a lot of the younger individuals or people around my age, of course, as well, have followed Floyd Mayweather pretty much as he's been in that public spotlight. And I would think that most would tend to favor his career and things that he's done just because or by virtue of they're able to experience them real time. Now, the same can be said about older fighters or fighters from a previous generation or era, which would be the case with Sugar Ray Leonard. So, those that were there to witness Sugar Ray Leonard at his peak during his best, they would have a similar feeling and they would similarly lean towards Sugar Ray Leonard being the more favorable fighter because they were able to be there to watch it, to understand how good he was during his time. And they kind of grew with him as he was on his journey. So you have those two parallels running against each other. Now, as a pro, both of these guys, I mean, we know that they were the best in their division at one point, or at least 147-pound division, with us using that as sort of the parameter for this matchup. Both of them, as mentioned, are held in high regard at 147 pounds. Now, they started at different weights, of course. Typically, fighters move up, and this is no different with them. We think of Floyd Mayweather and where he started out. It was in the junior lightweight range or super featherweight range, more around 130. And he worked his way up to become formidable and ultimately settled for 147, though he did move up to 154 junior middleweight in that general range at varying points as well. So do you think about Sugar Ray Leonard? He started, just under the welterweight limit, but for the most part was operating as a welterweight or in that welterweight range for a long period, probably longer than maybe Floyd did, just thinking about it from the perspective of where he started and the amount of fights that Leonard was able to have at 147. So if you add them up, probably not too far off. Just thinking about their 147-pound fights. And equally, if you look into the competition aspect of it, yeah, that's generally not too far off as well when you think about just some of the big names that they went up against during their divisions. Of course, you can think about or you can factor in the varying times or points within the career of those individuals, and that can kind of change the outlook or change the overall view of a particular fight. But no question, as it related to the names of the sport, as far as the other stars who they could get in the ring or they competed against at 147 pounds, both of them have a list full of those individuals just in general. So uh, when you look at their career as a whole, they also have a list full of big name individuals. And of course, some of the more famous fights of both of these individuals came at higher than 147 pounds. When you think about Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, this being a middleweight contest, you think about Floyd Mayweather Jr., Oscar De La Hoya, this being competed at junior middleweight, 154 pounds. So some of their bigger fights are certainly those that were even beyond 147, but generally around the same weights, especially if we take it back to the old days where you didn't have though as many of these junior divisions in between the real original weights. So they both shared that similarity. Both very, very explosive fighters when they were on their offensive games. Now, for Floyd Mayweather, the latter portion of his career, he shifted to more of a defensive fighter, but most certainly early on, as he started out, you could tell that he was gifted offensively. As I understand it, he had some hand problems at varying points during his career, so that may have very well been the primary catalyst for him shifting more to the defensive side. But when he was younger, he certainly was explosive on the offensive side, and we know that to be the case without a doubt with Sugar Ray Leonard. And he was able to, I think, win over the hearts and minds of people by showing that he was more than a quote unquote pretty face or just the good guy, good kid that you saw in the commercials, that you saw getting a lot of praise in media, etc., etc. And people wanted to see him tested, which he was. And going into that first fight with Roberto Duran, which is certainly one of Sugar Ray Leonard's most famous fights, he showed that he could bite down, battle in the trenches, and in some sense go punch for punch with Duran to a certain degree, even if that meant that he wasn't necessarily employing his game or his strong suits in that process. And that essentially won over some people as well because they saw that he was more than just the face of the guy that was sort of on that pedestal as the face of boxing in some sense, and he could back it up in the ring. With Floyd Mayweather, he's worked his way up to the point where he too became the face of boxing, and this happened during the portion of his career where he was most certainly more of a defensive fighter. And by that, it didn't mean he did not have offense. It just meant more so that defense was the strong suit and certainly the leading means for which he orchestrated his game plans, employing the tactics and optics of hit and not being hit. And that allowed him to be successful as he continued to get up there in age and still fight at a high level. Because in a lot of cases, when he was taking on some of these 147 pounders, he was the older guy, or they were generally around the same age. And Floyd just had a training regiment, and or he had sort of a training regime, or yeah, regiment, sorry, that he employed, and it helped him to stay in shape at all times. It helped him to stay focused on being ready at essentially the beacon's call. So him, much like Leonard, these were two guys who were already always ready to go in terms of when you saw them outside of the ring, and there wasn't a bunch of blowing up in weight, this type stuff. They generally look the same as far as where they are now here on this particular day in 2023. Though Leonard's is a bit older, but they look generally around the same weight that they fought at. So not too far off from there, and that speaks to the discipline that they had as fighters and just being a part of the sport in itself. So I think both of these guys would approach a fight with each other in the highest order, and they make sure that they came in 100% ready to go, and that you would be seeing the best of what they had to offer. I think they would push each other, and especially if you think about how Leonard was offensively to start his career, or at least while he was at 147 pounds, and you think about the defensive nature of Floyd Mayweather employing the shoulder roll at 147 pounds, then it seems to stylistically make for an interesting matchup, and probably makes one kind of wonder, like, what would break through at that particular point? What would be the factor that would separate them while they're there in the ring? Because both were pretty much fast. Both were excellent technically from a fundamental standpoint in terms of knowing all the tricks of the trade in the ring, knowing how to throw the right punches, having the ability to throw every punch. You talk about feigning, etc. They were just masters at it. And there are certain things that you can just envision, even if you just were to close your eyes and envision Floyd Mayweather boxing or Sugar Ray Leonard boxing. You can piece together through the imagination just exactly how they go about applying their trade, because they were very much sound and standouts in what they would do from an overall ability standpoint. Now, it's always tough when you're matching individuals at this level, and we're talking about an elite level, as with the case, or as is the case with these matchups that we have been going through here during this series, random, and just at that level, yeah, there's not a lot of room for mistakes, and everyone has the ability to be able to beat the other fighter. And so, as I mentioned in similar lives, yeah, it might be just little small things, little small technical things. You look for a little incremental changes that you can make in the contest to take you over the edge. You think about the mental piece of it, and how do you move past a fighter in front of you who you can't tell from a visual perspective is breaking who doesn't look to be giving in visually. And I think certainly that would be the case with both of these fighters. They have that mental fortitude to hold it all together. I mean, think about the number of times we saw Floyd in some little rumblings and he was able to maintain his poise. Think about the Zab Judah fight in that situation. Floyd remained poised while all the chaos was going on in the ring. So you know that he's going to be focused. And same will be the case for Sugar Ray Leonard, who always brought it and was dialed in. Now, Floyd is certainly at 147 in the latter stages. He's the type of fighter, as mentioned, just thinking about it from that defensive posture and that shoulder roll. He liked to pick fighters off as they were coming in. Uh, he didn't necessarily at times always throw the combinations, but he made sure that the shots that he threw counted. And if he saw the openings for said combinations, then he could get them off. And he was very efficient. You look over the course of his career, he'll have a high percentage as far as the overall CompuBox, or not CompuBox, but the overall percentage as far as punches landed. I guess that is CompuBox in some sense, but similar capacity. But you look at his connect percentages over the course of his career, I'd imagine they'll be some of the highest just among those fighters, if not the highest. Thinking about the fighters that have been rated with such during this current, or at least as long as they've been doing it. So that will be the case with Floyd. Sugar Ray Leonard, very technical as well, as mentioned, but most certainly explosive on the offensive end when he needed to be, and definitely threw punches in bunches. And he had that killer instinct to get a fighter out of there as far as finish fighters, which is an added plus because oftentimes we've seen where fighters get broken down and they get consensually outboxed in a major way, but they aren't necessarily finished. It ends up going to the decision. And that happened with some of the fights for Floyd, and not that it didn't happen at times with Leonard, but if you look at just the overall mentality from a finishing perspective, then I think that Leonard had more of that instinct that was instilled in him, especially just thinking about him at 147 pounds. So if he saw the opening, he had a guy broken down, had him hurt, he would go for aim and get that finish. Now, Floyd, yeah, he would masterfully outbox opponents. And if an opportunity presented itself, then he would take advantage at times, and he was able to get some stoppages. Uh, but a lot of that was earlier in his career where he was more explosive on the offensive side instinctually. At 147 pounds, I don't know that he had a ton of knockouts just overall, especially by comparison to Sugar Ray Leonard, because Floyd, he would break a fighter down. They usually end up going the distance, but you notice that they had been in a fight, and in most cases, it wouldn't be close on the cards unless there was some funny business going on. So you have those two parallels that are there, and it makes it interesting. You just think about it, as I was saying, we can think about a lot of the modern fighters or the fighters of this past decade or so, and we can name them who Floyd was in with. He was in with pretty much the majority of them, as I mentioned, varying stages of their career. But Shane Mosley, Canelo Alvarez, Miguel Cotto, I mean, and the list goes on. So he was in there with some big names, and I think that bodes well, of course, in his case and in his favor as far as people holding him in high regard. In the case of Sugar Ray Leonard, he was in with some huge names, and if you look at it from a certain standpoint, certainly names that you might hold in higher regards than the names that are on Floyd's resume at 147 pounds. And two, of course, of significance being the hitman Thomas Hearns and Hands of Stone Roberto Duran, who go down as some of the just absolute great fighters we've seen in the sport, bar none, period. And just the way that Sugar Ray Leonard was able to do what he did in that fight with uh, Thomas Hearns was, I believe it just showed that, man, he just had that extra something, because when down on the cards, when it seems as though he was headed towards a decision loss or something of that nature, he bit down and did what he needed to do to get him out of there, because he had no other choice. And Thomas Hearns, as we know, one of the biggest punchers in the history of the sport, and a guy uniquely long, tall, and lanky for the division. So a fighter who would give so many individuals problems just across the board. And then, of course, we know how Roberto Duran got down. Great boxer, one of the biggest punchers the sport has seen. And as mentioned, when Leonard tried to fight his fight in that first contest, he had a good showing, but Duran edged him out, and it was a great battle. But just the fact that Leonard was willing to go there shows that he was wired in a particular type of way. And then you think about Wilfred Benitez, another big name that he was able to defeat there. So you can look at it from that standpoint of how do those three guys right there alone compare to the others that Floyd took on there at 147, and then the stage in which he took them, the stage of their careers in which they fought. Then I lean a little bit towards, or I lean more to Sugar Ray Leonard in that regard, just looking at it from face value because of what he was able to do with those individuals who go down as truly some of the greats that the sport has seen. And then there's the other piece that is thrown in there. Now, some people mention that it doesn't matter, and to a certain degree, it doesn't matter. But Sugar Ray Leonard, he also fought Floyd's father, Floyd Mayweather Sr., and broke through that shoulder roll. That you could argue, hey, Floyd and he himself has said he perfected the shoulder roll in a new type of way. But certainly, if you just think about the tactical aspect of it, I do think that Sugar Ray Leonard, he's offensively sound enough, and he has enough speed and pop to be able to, if not fully just breaking through the shoulder roll, apply enough damage to where things on the card would even be leaning more towards his side, and it would force more of a fight from Floyd Mayweather on the offensive end. And I think a good example of Sugar Ray Leonard doing such is when he just broke down Floyd Mayweather Sr.'s shoulder roll, and that was essentially kind of a start and introduction to it, or at least or just thinking about this comparison with Floyd Mayweather and how that would actually pan out. That gives us sort of an introduction to it, or a start to, okay, we can build from there. Of course, two different fighters, as mentioned. Floyd Mayweather Jr., a greater fighter than Floyd Mayweather Sr., and a lot of different tactics and all of that stuff would be employed in a different way. But that being said, I do think that Sugar Ray Leonard was one of those types of individuals that stylistically could work, could essentially do damage with any individual who's fought at heavyweight. So I think he matches up well with just about any individual you can name, including Floyd Mayweather. and you could argue the same for Mayweather as well. And when thinking about sort of that difference, certainly the offensive side, I think is where Sugar Ray Leonard would prove to excel a little bit better. And I'm not saying from the standpoint of, hey, it may not look exactly the same. It may not look as clean as some of the pot shots that Floyd Mayweather will throw and land in an efficient manner. But when Sugar Ray Leonard was able to put his punches together, yeah, it was just an onslaught. It was a thing of beauty, and it was something tough to deal with for sure. And I think that would even be the case with Floyd Mayweather employing that shoulder roll. I just think the offensive prowess of Sugar Ray Leonard would show in that particular fight. And one of the, I think, all-time knockouts, at least in my book, is the Sugar Ray Leonard knockout over Davey Boy Green. And every time I see that, I just think you see an explosive, just an explosive combination of speed, timing, power, all gelled into one. It just shows the explosiveness of an elite fighter and a fundamentally sound fighter putting his punches together at a high degree. And I just see that and just know that Sugar Ray Leonard is very much capable on the offensive end of giving any and everyone problems. And I think that would be the case with him and Floyd being in there. I just think that the offensive nature of Sugar Ray Leonard would prove through, because from a fundamental standpoint, yeah, it's not like there's this leaps and bounds. If you favor one fighter fundamentally over the other, it isn't by any wide margin or stretch or anything of that nature. Might be a few small things, if that. And so then you really kind of just factor in the other aspects. And I think just the explosive nature of Sugar Ray Leonard and what we were able to see from him at his peak, I give that a higher edge or a higher rating than that of Floyd Mayweather, even when factoring in the explosive, more offensive Floyd Mayweather from the lower weights. I just think that even if you factor in that version, from what I could see, just offensively, Sugar Ray Leonard, man, he was just an animal. And him having that technical ability, but being sound enough to put it all together in a way that offered him more of that killer instinct, I think that is one of the deciding factors. Not unlike Crawford, for instance, Terrence Crawford, and we've seen him as he recently fought Errol Spence, but another guy who's just so sharp and so offensively sound with that killer instinct that, that's something that can be a separator. And I think that's a separator for Sugar Ray Leonard. So that's my initial thoughts on it, but there's certainly varying different ways we could dive into this, and maybe the scenario switches up. But I do just give that slight edge to Sugar Ray Leonard just because of that extra gear he would put into place if he saw that he had a fighter hurt, or if he felt he needed to get that last ditch effort in to ensure that he came through victorious.
Yeah, right on, brother. Good analysis there, 86. Good in-depth. That's what we're aiming for, folks. Some good in-depth stuff for your listening pleasure and for our own personal gratification as historical enthusiasts. Yeah, I think in this matchup, I favor. I think it's almost like it's if we could go an extra layer of fantasy, you take a lightweight Floyd and then blow him up to a welterweight size, more of a pound for pound fight. I think at welter, I gotta favor Ray Leonard. I mean, they're both supremely skilled, razor sharp. They both are adaptable. They have a lot of heart, good chins, good recovery. They pretty much total package fighters, right? But Ray Leonard could flurry, and like you alluded to, he's or explicitly said, he's that offense, that killer mindset. I do think that wins him the fight. Like, even if Floyd's able to damage him early, I mean, an extremely educated jab, and use it, and you can split the guard with the cross. I mean, Floyd had his understanding of angles is almost supernatural. But he'd be fighting another guy who had a similar understanding, another great technical stylist. But also, I think just at welter specifically, I think just Ray Leonard, he's more he has the killer instinct, and I do think that's the separator in this fight, where he's going to try and push Floyd off the cliff. Floyd shells up. He's not going to just be like, oh, I'll reset and go to the middle of the ring and wait for him. He's going to come in with flurries. That double left hook of his, that sort of double leaping left hook. He had a lot of ways to punish a guy for not being active. And I think in this fight, although they both have fantastic jabs, jab cross, like, all the fundamentals are perfect, and they can both throw in combos. But I do think that great reaction time. But I think that it's going to be a volume issue for Floyd, and Leonard's going to come in heavy at the ends of the rounds, try to steal the rounds, even if they're close. And I just think realistically, if they fought at their best, or at the best version of welterweight that each of them attained, we're going to see Ray Leonard. And I don't know if he's able to stop Floyd, unless maybe on cuts. But I think, how many rounds are they fighting here, Josh?
Well, I mean, yeah, 12 would probably be the ideal or more optimal, for Floyd, of course, since he hadn't fought 15 rounders. But if it would be 15 rounds, then that's an edge for Leonard, I guess, on paper in some sense. But I know that Floyd trains beyond just the 12 round limit, even though he didn't necessarily fight 12 rounds, or that he was past that particular time frame.
Yeah, that's a good point. He has superb conditioning, obsessive training regimen. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's likely that would see a stoppage. Maybe not even in a 15 rounder, but I think I slightly favor Leonard on points. Fairly close, though. I mean, he's gonna get hit, because he's not fighting a guy who's chaotic. He's fighting another sort of technical assassin. I think the aggression will pay off over the course of a fight, but he's not going to win all the rounds. He's not going to be able to bully Floyd totally. He's going to eat some hard counters, and Floyd's going to be, even when he leads, he's going to look to counter off the counter. So yeah, it's going to be, I mean, one of the great fights, and I think Leonard would bring the best out of Floyd as far as the welterweight version of Floyd. But I don't think he has, like, he's 2 inches shorter, and he's got a 2-inch shorter reach. So we're talking wingspan. So put an inch on each arm for Ray Leonard, a master of millimeters. That's going to add up. Plus his height. I think, not that he could automatically beat smaller fighters or shorter fighters, but I think in this one, where Mayweather's more defensive, that little bit of extra range and a little bit of height is going to work in Leonard's favor. Even if maybe it takes a little bit of the sting off that, like those leaping left hooks he was hitting Hearns with. I think to such great effect. But yeah, I think he's gonna outwork Mayweather. Now, Josh, I only have a couple minutes left, maybe like 7 or 8 minutes left. So I'm gonna go with a slight win on points over 12 rounds, and somewhat more certainty over 15. But what do you see if, say, they fought 5 times across their careers? Well, they're both more modern fighters. How about a trilogy? What do you think if they fought a trilogy, at 2 or 3 across 2 or 3 different weights?
Yeah, so I think in the case of Leonard, because we saw him rise a bit further up than Floyd per se, I think that he would excel as the weight went up. While Floyd did fight at junior middleweight, really, I believe the only time it was fully at 154 pounds was De La Hoya, Now, I could be wrong, and if someone knows that, definitely drop it in the comments. But I know oftentimes some of those 154-pound matchups were at catch weights of like 152 pounds, things of that nature. And of course, Sugar Ray Leonard has fought at catch weights as well. But I think about the fact that, of course, he did go to middleweight full fledged. And of course, we know he was able to get a decision over Marvin Hagler. So I think, yeah, rising up in weight, it continues to move more in Sugar Ray Leonard's favor. Now, Sugar Ray Leonard, the natural 147 pounder, I would say, I think that factors in, just thinking about the weight aspect. Could he get down below that? Interesting. He probably could, but I don't know that we have, that example outside of when he was an amateur. And of course, Floyd, with him starting at 130, yeah, I'd imagine it would favor him if Leonard had to drop down in weight to compete at something lower than 147, especially at a particular stage in his career. Because as I mentioned, he did start below the welterweight limit just from an overall weight perspective, but still he wasn't below 130 pounds, or at least 140 pounds as a pro from what I recollect and what I'm being able to gather. So yeah, anything below that, you would have to think that favors Floyd, with the assumption that this was a stipulation that was thrown into the mix while the two were fighting in a series. But taking the other divisions out of it and say they just fought a series at 147 pounds, it would be interesting. We have had some situations where Floyd fought rematches and he did better in the rematches with individuals. Of course, I can think about Castillo. I can think about Maidana in terms of here at the later stage of his career. He seemed to operate fairly better in rematches. And by that same token, you can say the same is the case for Sugar Ray Leonard, especially thinking about the Duran rematch. But some would maybe argue timing of the rematch for Duran or anything of that nature. So there's certainly avenues or paths by which Floyd maybe, hey, he loses that first fight, goes back and looks to change a few things to make sure that he can make those adjustments. He was very much capable of making adjustments. So maybe he slips in a decision win in the mix there, especially if it was a situation where he got off to a early start and built up a lead in a similar capacity to what Tommy Hearns did with Leonard. Then maybe that would afford him a better opportunity to gain the decision by using his defense and trying to slow down the engagement and not staying in a single spot or a single area of the ring too long for Sugar Ray Leonard to really get off his offense in the way that he would like to. So certainly you could conceive a way in which Floyd could right the ship in a series of contests between the two. And yeah, it's all going to depend on the focus and mentality of both of those fighters. But as I mentioned, yeah, they both fought at a very high level. They're both disciplined, and I think that both would have that sort of iron will towards whatever approach taken to try and overcome any deficiency or any form of defeat. They both have that type of mentality, so it could certainly change on a whim. And surrealists, idealists mentioned in the chat, are there major differences in the way they train and prepared? I was going to actually comment on that, surrealist, idealist, but I think that's relevant to it. I think both of them trained most certainly at a high level. They were both well conditioned. They both were very disciplined, as mentioned, in terms of, if you look at them in between fights, I don't recall ever seeing either of them out of shape or in a situation where they didn't look, even if they hadn't been in the gym, they certainly didn't look as though you could tell that they hadn't been in the gym to that degree, you know. And Dan mentioned, of course, the with the detached retina with Sugar Ray Leonard. Yeah, that seemingly was almost going to derail his career. I mean, and of course, he worked his way back from that. But for the most part, yeah, I think both of these were very disciplined, engaged fighters when it came to the outside of the ring stuff, as far as the training piece of it and being fight ready and in shape. Yeah, I don't know the individual tactics that some may have employed. Yeah, certainly, probably different things, but I think both of them would have certainly still gone that the route they did in terms of making sure they ate right, have the nutritionness, and just being on point with all of that stuff. So I don't think there's probably a ton of separation between the overall training, you know, because as mentioned, Ray Leonard, he was built to go 15 rounds. And I think if it were 15 rounds, Floyd would certainly be capable of going 15 rounds if that were the round limit for the contest that he fought in. So I think they're kind of pretty much on par as it relates to that.
Oh, well said, my friend. Yeah, it's a. I think for me, like, yeah, the welter is the right place for them to fight. I suppose you could do a pound for pound. Like, what if the lightweight version of Floyd, the more aggressive,
Yeah.
offensively minded Floyd, fought the welterweight legend, you know, prime Ray Leonard? I think that's a closer fight. I think that's a lot closer fight. I think at welterweight, Leonard's just got too much, and he's naturally that size, and it's hard, you know. And at welter, some of the people Floyd fought at welter had come up themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not sure how many of his fights are against career welterweights, but certainly Ray Leonard would count as a man at welter, like with Barbados Walcott, regardless of what weights he fought at. You know, at that weight, that was, that was
Oh, yeah.
critical. We might have to weave these guys in with a fight with Walcott before, or Hank Armstrong, or some other guys, Ray Robinson. I know all these are going to happen, but I think
Yeah.
with this matchup at welter, specifically at 147, Ray Leonard has the advantages. And
Yeah, real quick, random. While I have you and thinking about that, I just want to rattle this off. So Mayweather, he had Zab Judah, Oscar De La Hoya, Ricky Hatton, Juan Manuel Marquez, Shane Mosley. Then I'll throw in Miguel Cotto, but it was at one. I guess it was at 154. So it looks like that came in at 154. Floyd came in under 154, but seemingly not a catchweight there. But just thinking about those names, and of course Manny Pacquiao, which came in 2015. Of course, the last mega fight, out of this world fight, and just thinking about those names, how would you compare any of those guys in relation to Roberto Duran, Thomas Hearns, or even Wilfred Benitez?
yeah, well, I don't want to claim to know more than I do about this time period in boxing. I studied like 90 years before this or whatever, but 80 years or some for the other guy. I think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think but I think holding Benitez and Hearns, and Duran over Floyd's best welterweight opponents, even though Duran was coming up. I mean, were any of the fighters that came up and fought Floyd as great as Duran? I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, Duran even won that fight. I mean, because there's a reason he's revered. So, yeah, I think I would put the best wins of Ray Leonard's career above the best of Floyd's. Although Floyd had some really good wins,
Yeah.
made some really good fighters look not so good. A lot too often for it to be like an unusual thing for it to have happened. So yeah, I think it's a tough fight, because I think as Ray Leonard escalates, Floyd is going to respond. I mean, he's going to kick into he's hyper competitive himself. He's not just going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'll just Philly shell and lose on points. So it's going to be ugly. But yeah, Ray Leonard had a hell of a punch, and he could throw a million of them, like just stunning speed. And I don't know if Floyd ever fought anyone who had all those capabilities. I think that would be Floyd's toughest fight of his career, possibly. quite probably. But I
Yeah.
don't know if Floyd would be the toughest fight of Ray Leonard's career. I mean, we can match Floyd with Tommy Hearns next. If you want, we can talk about that one. That's epic. I've got just 2 minutes left, Josh. It's been fantastic. I'm off to work. Folks, thanks for tuning in and spend a little time with us talking about these great fighters. We almost needed longer just for this one matchup, but well done, Josh. It was excellent analysis. So I think we have a consensus between the two of us that we'd advantage Leonard in this matchup, specifically at welter, not a pound for pound, not a, make, the lightweight Floyd, whatever, 10% larger and then fight. Like, I think Ray Leonard takes it. He's more epic at welterweight, fighting more natural welterweights.
Thank you, Random. It's been great just being able to tune in and join in the mix there. But yeah, we agree.
What a pleasure. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. We'll try to do another one of these soon. And look out, Josh has a live stream. Is it tomorrow night, Josh? On Dead Red Martin, was it?
Wednesday night. So we'll check that out Wednesday night.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wednesday night. Go to 86Boxing. Check it out. Also, you can follow him, 86Boxing on Twitter. You can find me, Teep to the Junk, or here on my Random Acoustic Thoughts channel. Folks, have a great day. Thanks for joining us.